Imagine pouring a cold, rich glass of lion milk directly into your morning coffee, or picturing a glass of tiger milk sitting in your fridge right next to the regular carton. It sounds disturbing, almost biological science fiction. But if you strip away human habit and look purely at nature, every single mammal on Earth produces milk. Lions nurse their cubs in the savannah. Wolves produce nutrient-rich milk for their pups in the frozen tundra. Grizzly bears spend months in winter dens nursing their newborns. So why has human civilization built a multi-billion-dollar global industry around cow, goat, and sheep milk, but never once attempted to farm a predator? Why did our ancestors spend 10,000 years domesticating herbivores while predator milk remained completely off-limits? The simple answer most people assume is that big cats and wild wolves are just too dangerous to touch. But that is only the tip of a massive biological iceberg. The true reason comes down to a brutal combination of ecosystem, thermodynamics, evolutionary psychology, extreme biochemical mismatch, environmental toxicology, and thousands of years of cultural taboo. Nature built an impenetrable wall that made predator farming impossible at every single step. And the very first wall humans ran into thousands of years ago isn't about claws or teeth. It comes down to a fundamental law of physics, the 10% rule of energy. To understand why predator dairy farming is impossible, trace how energy moves through a living planet. It starts with the sun. Grass harvests solar energy through photosynthesis. A dairy cow walks onto a field, eats that cheap, renewable grass, and converts that energy into body mass and milk. Whenever energy moves up the food chain, roughly 90% is lost as heat, movement, and waste. Only 10% reaches the next level, because cows sit on the first consumer tier, eating plants directly. They are thermodynamic powerhouses. They take worthless cellulose that humans can't digest and turn it into massive volumes of liquid calories. A single modern dairy cow can easily produce over 8 gallons of milk every day with astonishing efficiency. Now, try running that same thermodynamic equation with an apex predator. A lioness cannot digest grass. Her digestive tract is built exclusively for meat. To keep a single lioness alive and lactating, you can't just open a pasture door. You would first need to grow thousands of pounds of plants, feed those plants to hundreds of prey animals, slaughter those animals, and then feed that high-cost meat to the lioness. You take a 90% energy loss at the plant level, a second brutal 90% loss at the herbivore level. Then you expect the lion to process that meat into milk, taking a third loss. The metabolic math crumbles instantly. You spend tens of thousands of calories of expensive protein to harvest a tiny fraction back in liquid form. Predators simply lack the biological energy surplus required to produce extra milk sitting around for humans to harvest. Now, let's play a thought experiment. Assume feed was free. Assume you had unlimited meat to feed big cats or wild canines. You immediately crash into the second biological wall, the nightmare of harvesting it. Commercial dairy farming relies on one interaction: calm, twice-a-day physical contact with a lactating female. Morning and night, a handler must extract fluid. A dairy cow or farm goat tolerates a human crouching beside her because 10,000 years of selective breeding completely erased her ancestral defense mechanisms. We bred the aggression out of the wild aurochs until we were left with a docile herd animal. A lactating predator does the exact opposite. In the wild, the moment a predator mother gives birth and begins lactating, she becomes the single most dangerous creature on the landscape. Her brain chemistry is hardwired for absolute hyper-vigilance. Her instincts treat any unfamiliar creature approaching her physical space, especially near vulnerable newborns, as a direct mortal threat that must be destroyed. Farmers didn't decide predator milk was off-limits. Predator mothers made that decision for them the very first time an ancient human tried to get close to a nursing nest. You cannot simply selectively breed that aggression out of a wild carnivore over generations, because domestication requires a pre-existing social architecture that predators completely lack. Every single animal humans successfully domesticated, cows, goats, sheep, horses, were naturally social herd animals. They evolved in complex social groups with defined hierarchies, where submissive individuals yielded to dominant leaders. Humans hacked that evolutionary programming, stepping into the role of the dominant leader. Solitary predators like leopards, tigers, and bears never evolved a social hierarchy in the first place. There is no framework inside a tiger's brain for accepting a boss. In pack-oriented carnivores like wolves, social structures are maintained through constant physical dominance and territorial defense. Trying to build a calm breeding program around an animal whose baseline defense mechanism is lethal force means step one repeatedly gets the handler killed. Now, here is where it gets uncomfortable. Imagine you built a fully automated robotic facility. You raised wolves or bears in total isolation, paid the food bill, and used machines to extract their milk without risking human life. You stand there holding a fresh glass of wolf or bear milk. You take a sip and run into the third wall. Human biochemistry. You literally cannot drink it without making yourself violently ill. Milk is a hyper-specialized biochemical formula engineered by millions of years of evolution to push a specific newborn species across growth milestones as fast as possible. Look at marine mammals for context. A hooded seal mother produces milk that is over 50% fat, having the consistency of cold mayonnaise or thick butter. Why? Because a seal pup born on Arctic ice floes needs to build thick insulating blubber in days before the ice melts. Predator milk trends in that exact same extreme direction. Because wild carnivore mothers must leave their den hidden for long stretches to hunt, they cannot nurse continuously like a grazing cow. Evolution engineered carnivore milk to be a super concentrated calorie bomb. Human milk sits at roughly 4% fat and is packed with lactose, a sugar designed to fuel the slow-growing brain of a primate. Cow's milk sits around 3.5% fat, perfectly dilute for human gut enzymes to process easily. Predator milk is intensely dense, packed with heavy proteins and complex lipids designed to force a cub to double its weight in days and build predatory muscle in weeks. If a human digestive system ingests fluid engineered for an animal built to tear raw muscle, your gut doesn't absorb it. It panics. The human stomach lacks the specific enzymatic balance and bile concentrations required to break down such dense protein structures. Ingesting it triggers severe digestive distress, violent cramps, and extreme nausea. Our digestive tracts were built for dilute primate fluid, not heavy-duty carnivore fuel. Then, there's what predator milk actually contains deep inside that dense fat layer: biomagnification. Toxins and heavy metals accumulate up the food chain. When a cow eats grass with trace contaminants, its body filters most of it out. But when a predator spends its life eating hundreds of those herbivores, it absorbs every single microdose of pollutants those animals ever consumed. Because carnivores sit at the absolute top of the food pyramid, their body fat acts as a storage vault, bioaccumulating toxic compounds over a lifetime. Where does a nursing mother's body source the dense fat required to build milk for her young? Directly from her own body fat reserves. When toxicologists study top-tier predators like polar bears or wild wolves, they consistently find that nursing mothers offload terrifyingly high concentrations of heavy metals, industrial chemicals, and pollutants directly through their mammary glands. The mother's body purges its lifetime of stored environmental toxins directly into her milk fat. Drinking predator milk wouldn't just be hard on your stomach. It would mean drinking a concentrated chemical cocktail of every pollutant that predator ever encountered. Now, go further back in history. Did ancient humans ever try to consume predator milk out of sheer survival? The historical exceptions are telling precisely because they prove the absolute rule. Ancient mythology has stories like Romulus and Remus suckled by a she-wolf. But Roman agricultural texts never mention wolf milk as food. In real historical famines across medieval Europe and Asia, starved populations slaughtered their dogs, horses, and livestock for meat. Yet, even in the deepest records of human starvation, there is virtually zero record of humans milking captive predators. The biological cost was always too high, and the yield was practically non-existent. Because nature made predator milk so dangerous and useless, human culture codified this biological reality into deep-seated religious laws and dietary taboos. Look at ancient dietary codes across the world. In Leviticus and ancient kashrut laws, consumption of apex predators, and by extension their milk, was explicitly banned. Islamic dietary laws similarly prohibited the consumption of predatory animals with fanged teeth. These weren't arbitrary spiritual rules. They were early cultural mechanisms designed to protect human populations from parasitic infections, biomagnified toxicity, and metabolic sickness associated with top-tier carnivores. Over thousands of years, these cultural rules evolved into a deeply ingrained psychological imprinting, an instinctual sensory disgust. Your brain reacts to the idea of wolf or lion milk with immediate revulsion, not just because it sounds odd, but because evolutionary psychology hardwired humans to reject biological fluids carrying lethal toxicity risks. When you look at the complete picture, the reality becomes blindingly clear. Humans didn't skip predator milk by historical oversight. Every natural system on Earth, from ecosystem energy flow and evolutionary psychology to biochemical engineering, toxicology, and cultural taboos, points to the exact same conclusion. The energy math fails before you start. the physical danger stops you at the gate. The animal's brain refuses domestication. The chemical composition revolts against your digestive tract. Top-tier toxicity turns the fluid into a bioaccumulated hazard, and thousands of years of human culture sealed the door shut forever. The simple carton of milk sitting in your refrigerator right now is the end result of a 10,000-year-old partnership between human civilization and a select group of animals, gentle enough, energy efficient enough, and biochemically aligned enough to let us step safely into their world twice a day. The lion was never going to stand quietly in the milking parlor. The wolf was never going to offer up her milk for your morning coffee. And nature made sure it would stay that way forever.